Hello, good afternoon, good
Hi.
morning, from wherever you're calling. This is the Latin American Ethnography Seminar Series. This is the third session of this academic year and the last of the autumn term. This is a series hosted by CLACS, which is part of the Institute of Languages, Cultures and Societies at the School of Advanced Study, University of London. My name is Denise Roman. I co-convened this seminar with my colleagues Ainhoa Montoya at CLACS and Jessica Sclair at Queen Mary University in London. However, they couldn't join us today, unfortunately, but I have here our colleague Gabriel Vallarri, who is here as a co-host. And I am delighted to introduce today's speaker, María Florencia Blanco Esmoris, from Centro de Investigaciones Sociales, CONICET, in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. She will be presenting a talk titled Textured Dreams, Access to Housing and the Materiality of Home Ownership Among Middle Classes in Buenos Aires, Argentina. María Florencia will have around 30 to 45 minutes for her presentation. And then we will have a Q&A that will last around 30 minutes, aiming to end this seminar at 6 p.m. UK time. We are recording the presentation, but not the Q&A. And in a couple of weeks, or maybe next year, you will be able to watch it at the CLACS YouTube profile. So, Florencia, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. I will try to share my screen and let me know if you are seeing my PowerPoint presentation. Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, and can you hear me well also?
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. So first, I would like to thank Jessica Sclair, Ainhoa Montoya, and Denise Roman for the invitation and for allowing me to be part of this valuable space for presenting my work at this Latin American ethnography seminar. Also to the attendees for the possibility of being heard in a challenging global and local context in Argentina, which require us to think and to continue to foster this type of opportunities, perhaps more than ever. So let me share with you two vignettes. The first one. Luisa's parents emigrate from Paraguay and built their family house in South Morón, room by room. First, the bathroom, because it's the first need to continue with the construction. Luisa is 60 years old, and during her childhood, she lived among fratachos, trowels, unplastered walls, and the expectation of joining what Argentina offered, which implied settling in the land. Later, Luisa and her husband built a house a few blocks away from the family home and started with the ground floor, so they could move downstairs while the upstairs was being built. As she had learned, she did the bathroom first. Second vignette. Clara sweeps the rented flat in South Morón. This is in the outskirts of the province of Buenos Aires. And then hands the key to its owner. Between boxes, she looks out the window and sighs. This is the fourth move she has made in less than 4 years. This time, she did not get a good price in the area, nor did she get a direct owner possibility to save the contractual cost. But she wanted something better. Clara is moving to Aedo, and for that she turned to a real estate agency. She raised money, peso by peso, to pay for the contract, and her mother, Marisa, a teacher who is retired, acted as a guarantor. Clara spends more than half of her salary on rent. She's a professional of 33 years old, and like other people of this generation, has neither the possibility nor the expectation of accessing to this dream of home ownership. The sigh, in part, is the pause of that dream in life. As is known, access to housing in cities has returned to the center of debate in struggles and countless demands in Argentina and also around the world. In the cities, we find recurring scenes: homelessness, tenants' claims, huge real estate developments, the aftermath of confinement, which seems to have led to an expulsion of people from urban areas. Also, material boundaries and symbolic borders between social groups as a product of socially and spatially distributed inequality that is still shaping our cities. Globally, according to UN Habitat, and listen to this, 90% of housing in developed and developing countries is not financially accessible to those for whom it was originally intended. Argentina does not escape this global dynamic. But as my research shows, it expresses particular aspects in the way in which people carry out this dream of home ownership, where the question is not only about access, but also requires to thinking about the material form that housing takes and the way in which people sustain these households in context of economic instability, as was in the case in Argentina between 2015 and 2019. So my thesis topic ended up situating at the intersection between home and family studies, social classes, and the material culture, with the aim of analyzing the processes involved in making this dream of home ownership a lived reality in the everyday life of families from middle classes. I have devoted myself to understanding the way in which family trajectories, particularly of those who perceive themselves as belonging to middle classes, are knocked and unknocked to this social group, and the achievement of home ownership as a milestone. I learned about life stories tied to the search for roots in the host country between migrant families. Also, how the property ownership has established as a social and moral mandate among the middle classes, with meritocratic narratives now shattered by the very reality of the new generations that embrace what I have called in my work substitute dream, sueño por sustitución, as the home ownership horizon deviates and other dreams appears to be more suitable, more possible. Through the research, I present how this dream of home ownership acquired an historically particular aesthetic, especially with the housing plans during Peronism, with the chalet house model, which pondered the missionary style as a model to be followed, as you can see in the picture. But this aesthetic has changed in the last decades. In my work, I specify the construction materials of dwellings, the furnishing, the type of electrical appliances, whether they are stainless steel or hard plastic, if the space is organized by walls and rooms, or if we are taking about an open plan concept house, just to mention a few details. I notice also how brick is progressively replaced by concrete as a new form of construction, but also as a new form of achieving a house as a whole, and not room by room, as I mentioned on the very first vignette. Among my analysis, I consider the way in which this is generationally transformed, where other aesthetics emerge, mediated by digital platforms and web decorators who build and ponder certain ideas over others, in such how short-term is being part of decoration decisions related to the type of materiality they use, the colors, and the type of interventions. I have seen something I call passageway house, that is a house lent by someone in the family that allow people, younger generations, to save money in order to buy and to have their own house. I will explain that later. But I see new uses and new forms of achieving this dream among the younger generations. So to achieve this research, I carry out an ethnographic approach and method between 2015 and 2019 with families living in Morón. This is the outskirts of Buenos Aires. The trajectory of the families took me to start analyzing new families while I was doing my research. What it is important to mention and to share with you is how I consider and how I choose these families, the criteria behind this. So the consideration of these families within this social class arose from certain socioeconomic observables that allow me an heuristic approach to middle classes, also from their self-ascription to this social group. I also discussed this idea, of course, of middle classes in my own thesis. But to share with you some of these criteria, for instance, they all live in their own houses, they have their own land. Their last level of education was tertiary, is like a community college, and also university. And in only one case was secondary school. The majority of men worked as self-employed professionals in different industries, such as construction and the printing industry, and women as professionals or entrepreneurs. In terms of income, they all exceed the average income for professional families, in some cases even doubling or tripling the value. And finally, the provision of health and education services was provided by privately run institutions. So these first criteria allow me to depict the houses I was about to work with. In addition to this, I conducted informal interviews with other middle-class families in the area. I worked on gathering statistical and historical information on urban development, also from this part of the outskirts of Buenos Aires. But let me tell you something about my fieldwork conditions, because we are talking about the intimacy of the daily lives of these people. So in terms of fieldworks, this research implied placing myself in the daily dynamics of these families. Be part of the third task, accompanying them shopping, going to events. I almost went on holiday with them. It didn't happen, but it would have been excellent, not only for myself, but from the sake of the fieldwork. But it was about incorporating myself into their own logics. This was challenging, as all ethnographic work is, especially when one considers oneself, I'm talking, of course, about me, as part of the social group you are studying. In this case, as an access, I use my own networks in this part of the city, as part of a hockey team alumni from a traditional Catholic school in the area, and also through reconnecting with mothers of my secondary school friends that live around there. This is about the access, but what about the permanence? How you are being there, how you manage your acceptance, not only with the nuclear family, but also with the extended family. So about this, I found that the best strategy is to expose yourself. And this was actually an idea from an interlocutor, that is Rosa, the woman I'm sharing the selfie with. She wanted to visit my rental apartment. This was a big surprise for me because I was only thinking about going to her home. So in that movement, I was somehow vulnerable for her. She knew my intimacy. And this idea of mi casa, tu casa, my house, your house, it was a reality. This type of strategies that arose from the very real fieldwork made it possible to continue my fieldwork, even though the long-term research. So following the lives of families for almost 4 years led me to deploy an analytical strategy that I called house stories, historias de casa, as a way of exploring material and symbolic articulation of family life and housing. So in my thesis, that is not exactly how I will present everything here, but I wanted to share this with you. Each dwelling emphasizes one materiality, one type of story, one generational experience, and one relation to the inhabited space. But before I continue with my presentation, and for those who are joining us, I have 2 questions, and if you can answer them by the chat, I would really appreciate. So the first one is, who owns the house where they live? And the second one related to this, for those who are owners, by what means did you gain access to this house? For instance, it was thanks to a bank loan, or you were eligible for some government housing program, etc. So at the end, please remember to put your name, pronoun, and country, and I will shortly return to your answer and see what happened is if someone is there. So again, who owns the house where they live? And for those who are owners, by what means did you gain access to this house? So now, returning to the housing access issue, what does access to housing look like, and what is being said about it? Some studies highlight that there are 3 logics that prevail in access to housing. The first one is market-based, is through mortgages and or access to financial loans. The second one is the public state-based, that is linked to state credit lines and housing programs. And the third one is what these authors call promoted need, de necesidad promovida, which refers to informal strategies, often anchored in networks of kinship. So I wanted to see, in your experience, how this was. I don't know if someone answer something in the chat or want to open the microphone to say their experience. I don't know. What about you, Denise or Gabriel? You own the house you live in? No.
No, I rent a flat.
You rent,
I rented to a family, and I got access to it through it's not through through a state run program, but it's a rental flat.
Okay.
Either, yeah.
Okay, so that's quite interesting because in younger generations, the rental is the option more suitable and more accessible in order to think about housing. So this is really related to what I have found in the experience of these families and their siblings and their daughters and sons, sorry. So my fieldwork in the peripheries of Buenos Aires revealed interesting practices and tactics. How in some cases there is funding for planning and construct, and how in many others it is built in parts and take years, even decades, as I share in the vignettes. Where these logics of access are a complex architecture. So sometimes you have this informal loan from an aunt, or to start, or to be eligible for a market loan. So this is a complex architecture that families devoted themselves to think about it. So initially, I noticed these two things. First, a sort of a blended strategy of these modalities suggested by these authors, where the promoted need prevails strongly, mobilizing kinship and friendship networks. And second, that among the middle sectors, the fact that the family in some cases has some type of property serve as a springboard or a starting point for the access of others, I mean sons of daughter, to this housing, as a sort of patrimonial arrangement. And this was this intergenerational strategy. Is what I referred previously, this passageway house, una casa pasaje, which is a family property that is lent until that person manages to save a minimum amount of money, discussion savings, to be able to access whether their own house or a loan for that house. So from my fieldwork, I understood that a way of access to housing was built on this patrimonial arrangement among middle classes, mostly for younger generations. And if not, they rent. But while access was diverse, so was the way in which the dream has been realized and the materialities used for that purpose, as I just mentioned, especially in Argentina, where the brick is really important, the ladrillo. It's important at least in two senses. First, as a metaphor for family investment and saving in something stable. And second, literally, as a form of construction, as a materiality that is durable. And this led me to a third vignette I wanted to share with you. So in the first vignette, I present Luisa, and now I'm presenting Isabella, that is Luisa's daughter. Isabella, Luisa's daughter, a young entrepreneur in her 30s, partially inherited this dream. She bought some demontable furniture, just like Clara, the one I mentioned at the very beginning. She understands that she needs to invest her money in goods that are disassembled. She thinks about a mobile and changing kind of life without roots. She lives in this passageway house, a property acquired by her father after the separation from Luisa, and in which her siblings lived before her, just paying only the maintenance cost until it was her turn. This is a kind of tactic that allowed them to save and make the difference. Isabella is a grain of sand among a generation that is sometimes forced to choose between melamine, MDF, chipboard, materials of immediacy, between the disposable and the possible. She relates to Marie Kondo's proposal as she can. She has also a coffee machine. And she spent hours in social media, especially in Pinterest, imagining the decoration of her house, white, minimalist, and replaceable. For Isabella, there are other horizons, other searches. She says she's investing in life. It can be a small daily pleasure, going out to eat or having fun. Others perceive this as a morally wrong activity or practice. She's burning money. For her, it's about to live. For her, it's about how to live and know where to live or in what condition, at least regarding to the materials, but not to the aesthetic. The dispute over which dream and which expectation it is at stake also enters into the context of what the home of one's own represents. For Isabella, it is the substitution of a tangible dream for an intangible one. She's going to leave the passageway house to her younger sister, and she only thinks about, in the best scenario, that this furniture will fit in her one-room flat, if she can afford it. If not, she will invest on traveling. This was a way of coping with material uncertainty, at least for her. So through this presentation and through this research, I found that my interlocutors talk about house and not about home. Because home has been removed from the experience of belonging and as a way of signifying their immediate dwelling. Home does not appear because the metaphor has been pulverized over the last decades. House, I know it is a difficult word to grasp, perhaps because there are as many ways of life as there are possible houses. And this is partially because of its fragmentary way of expressing itself, because it is desire, like Maria and Luisa, or because it is tedium, because it manifests itself as an option and also an impossibility, because it is a shape of a struggle and brick dust, because it is a fleeting dream and a truncated future. Yet is still house the significant word for housing among my interlocutors. So from my research, I arrived at the fact that the house appeals to this polysemy of its own, which cannot be thought of without the structural conditions, not only in which it is accessed, but also in which remains a possibility beyond the middle classes, that is for other social sectors. So perhaps one of the particularities among middle classes, at least in Argentina and in my research, is the weight it has in the story on the nation building narrative here. Is the story in which it is inscribed. In this sense, I propose to begin to denaturalize the house as a mark of distinction and or as the legitimating materiality among middle classes. Other thing other outcome, other finding, is the idea of lifestyle that normally appears as a product, but is, as I have seen, is a process. It's a process because when you are facing economic instability, you don't only construct room by room, but you also buy thing by thing. So far from considering a normative logic of lifestyle, it is an alternative, as I share with you in the experience of Isabella. Middle classes who rely on certain type of housing as a moral materiality decades ago now bring to the table other moral materialities to establish boundaries and borders within this social group. I mean, as a type of intra-stratification and with others. Younger generations, I mean between 20 and 40, think about the mobile and immobile furnitures, while the ones between 40 and 60 think about medium and long-term projects. We are talking about the experience of baby boomers born between 1945, 46, and 1964, and the Generation X born between 1965 and 1980. For them, a house crystallizes a path and accounts for a set of values linked to effort, saving, and work. As the migratory narrative of nation building in Argentina in the 20th century. Nowadays, however, the consumption of durable goods seems to occupy also this place. And an iPhone or an espresso could be an expression of a type of class update in which there is a displacement of the idea of property. We move from this idea of property related to the immovable to a property related to the idea what is movable, what is mobile. From patrimonial goods to goods that are durable for consumption. Implies a lower cost investment as well as the loss of rights. And I'm not talking about an omnivorous or consumer type of social behavior. I'm talking about the experience that ties together a nation-building memory and narrative of the tangible and enduring versus an experience of the proximate and immediate. So the focus on access to housing expresses also the ambiguity of responses to address housing deficits and housing problems, as well as the complexity of proposing different translation for what access can refer to. While the privatization proposal advances, the middle classes try to build answers to this. And for example, this passageway house is one of this. Perhaps in the best cases, the one in the best scenarios and cases. This reality makes it difficult for us anthropologists and social scientists to depict this landscape. We are called to think about this complexity that shows distances between their practices, discourses, and representation. Not to think in linear and homogeneous terms when referring to middle classes and housing access. So to leave some questions and to start talking, what do middle classes think and experience when accessing to house? To what extent and by what means these materialities operate as an armory of possibility? If these experiences of upward and downward mobility, social mobility, are warranted by housing access, which type of continuity and discontinuity can we propose with those experienced in other countries? What local cleavages are expressed in this possibility of thinking or stop holding to this stream? I really appreciate your attention and many thanks. this was like a first glance to my research, and I'm open to questions and to share thoughts and ideas, of course. You can contact me also if you want to know more about this.
Thank you, Florencia.